Look up at the night sky, and you might convince yourself that the universe is a quiet, distant tapestry, a backdrop designed for human contemplation. It is an illusion we desperately cling to. The reality is far more violent and profoundly indifferent to our existence. For decades, we have pointed our most advanced instruments toward the edge of time itself, hunting for the faint, red-shifted glow of the first galaxies. We looked outward, seeking the birth of creation, perhaps to avoid looking at the shadows lurking in our own solar system. But recently, the James Webb Space Telescope turned its golden, hexagonal mirrors away from the dawn of the cosmos. It focused its formidable array of near-infrared cameras on a small pale sphere orbiting the gas giant Jupiter, Europa. For a long time, Europa was nothing more than a celestial curiosity. It is a moon encased in a shell of fractured ice, 10 to 15 miles thick, shielding a subterranean ocean of liquid water from the hard radiation and absolute zero vacuum of deep space. We romanticized it. We imagined a pristine, dark ocean warmed by the relentless mechanical friction of Jupiter's gravity pulling at its core, an aquatic sanctuary locked in an endless night. We thought of it as a silent oasis in the dark, patiently waiting for our robotic probes to drill through the frozen crust and find simple, familiar biology. It was a comforting thought. An entire generation of astrophysicists and astrobiologists built their careers on the assumption that if anything existed down there, it would follow the quiet, predictable rules of terrestrial evolution. We were entirely wrong to be so optimistic. When Webb captured the precise spectral signatures bouncing off the chaotic, scarred terrain of Europa's surface, the data downlinked to Earth did not present the comforting baseline of a dormant ocean world. The spectroscopic analysis revealed a chemical imbalance so severe, an active upwelling of heavy carbon molecules so deeply concentrated, that it immediately shattered our current thermodynamic models of planetary geology. The telemetry pouring into the servers at the Space Telescope Science Institute tells a story of an environment under immense, almost violent stress. Something in the pitch-black abyss beneath that ice is generating an amount of thermal energy and chemical complexity that defies natural geological explanations. We are not looking at a quiet subsurface lake. We are looking at a churning cauldron of elements, behaving in ways that the fundamental laws of chemistry suggest they should not, isolated in total darkness for billions of years. The implications of this data do not just challenge our understanding of planetary formation. They introduce a terrifying variable into the mathematical equation of life in the universe. If you are willing to face the cold, unvarnished truth of our cosmos, to strip away the comforting illusions and explore the darkest corners of what we are now discovering, subscribe and join us on this journey. The ice of Europa is cracking, and what is spilling out into the vacuum is something we are completely unprepared to understand. To understand the sheer magnitude of what the James Webb Space Telescope has just detected, we must first systematically dismantle a comforting lie we have told ourselves for centuries. Human intuition is a strictly terrestrial phenomenon. It is an evolutionary byproduct of walking upright on a warm, sunlit rock, where water flows freely, the atmosphere is thick, and the passage of time is measured by the gentle rotation of day and night. We are a species biologically hardwired to associate life and complexity with sunlight, to equate warmth with safety, and to perceive the dark, freezing expanse of the outer solar system as a sterile, lifeless graveyard. Our brains are simply not calibrated to comprehend the architecture of deep space. We project our terrestrial biases onto the cosmos, building arbitrary, arrogant boundaries around what is possible based entirely on the sample size of exactly one inhabited planet. Consider the year 1610. When Galileo Galilei first pointed his crude, leather-bound refracting telescope toward Jupiter, he was completely unprepared for the architecture of reality he was about to uncover. He saw a massive, pale sphere accompanied by 4 distinct points of light. Over several freezing nights, he watched these points dance, shifting their positions in a relentless mathematical waltz around the gas giant. This was the discovery of the Galilean moons, of which Europa is the smallest and perhaps the most profoundly deceitful. Galileo's observation was the first heavy blow to human exceptionalism. It proved that Earth was not the center of all motion. that the universe operated on a mechanism of gravity and momentum entirely indifferent to human theology. Yet, even in that moment of profound scientific awakening, Europa was dismissed as nothing more than a frozen rock. A dead, silent satellite locked in a cold, eternal orbit, merely a celestial clockwork mechanism for astronomers to track. For the next 350 years, that assumption remained practically unchallenged. Astrophysics dictated a very strict regime for where liquid water, and therefore any potential biology, could exist. We called it the habitable zone, a term that reeks of planetary arrogance. The logic was deceptively simple, rooted in the behavior of light as it travels through the vacuum. As thermal radiation expands outward from a star, its intensity diminishes drastically. The mathematics dictate a harsh, unforgiving rule of dilution. A planet located twice as far from the Sun receives only a fraction of the light. Jupiter and its moons sit more than 5 times further from the Sun than Earth does. By the time sunlight reaches the orbit of Europa, it has been stretched and thinned by the vast empty distances of the outer solar system, arriving as a weak, ghostly twilight. It is a mere fraction of the energy required to thaw water, let alone drive the complex churning chemical engines necessary for an active geology. Therefore, the scientific consensus was absolute. Without the sun's fire to melt the ice, Europa was condemned to be a solid, inert tomb, all the way down to its core. But human logic is incredibly fragile when faced with the immense mechanics of a gas giant. The entire paradigm shattered when the Voyager probes tore through the Jovian system in the late 1970s, followed closely by the Galileo spacecraft in the 1990s. The telemetry they sent back was a masterclass in cosmic horror and physical impossibility. Europa was not heavily cratered like our moon, a dead surface keeping a billion-year record of asteroid impacts. Its surface was shockingly smooth, brilliantly white, and scarred by massive intersecting ridges, deep fissures, and chaotic fractured tectonic plates. The ice was undeniably young. It was healing itself. The revelation came not just from observing the surface, but by calculating the monstrous invisible gravitational forces at play. Jupiter is a behemoth, a failed star with a gravitational well so deep and violent it practically bends the fabric of space around it. As Europa orbits this monster, its path is not a perfect, serene circle. It is elliptical, caught in a perpetual, agonizing gravitational tug-of-war. Every time Europa swings close to Jupiter, the giant planet's gravity physically stretches the moon, elongating it. As it swings further away, the moon relaxes. Furthermore, Europa is locked in an orbital resonance with the massive neighboring moons, Io and Ganymede, which pull back against Jupiter's grip. This creates a terrifying physical reality. The entire moon is constantly being squeezed, warped, and distorted, its solid rock interior pulverized and kneaded by gravity itself. This mechanical friction generates an unimaginable amount of internal heat. It is a violent process that operates entirely in the pitch black, thousands of miles beneath the frozen, irradiated crust. The mathematics of orbital mechanics dictate that the heat radiating from this fractured core is more than enough to liquefy the underbelly of the ice shell. The result is a global subterranean ocean of salt water, plunging perhaps 100 miles deep. An abyss holding more than twice the liquid water found on all of Earth combined, permanently sealed beneath a ceiling of ice. For 20 years, astrobiologists have clung to this revelation like a lifeboat. They built elaborate, comforting models of deep-sea hydrothermal vents, imagining a quiet, isolated ecosystem powered by the slow radioactive decay of rock and the steady, rhythmic flexing of gravity. A slow, methodical, and profoundly silent biological engine. We pictured a dark, tranquil sea where the chemistry was stable, the temperatures were balanced, and the passage of 1,000,000 years changed almost nothing. We forced the chaotic reality of the outer solar system to fit into a neat, understandable box of terrestrial oceanography. We mapped our own deep-sea trenches onto an alien world to make the darkness feel less threatening. And then, we deployed the James Webb Space Telescope. We parked a $10 billion observatory 1,000,000 miles from Earth, equipped with a golden mirror perfectly calibrated to catch the oldest, coldest light in the universe. But Webb is not just a camera. It is a diagnostic tool for reality. It operates in the near and mid-infrared spectrum, perceiving the thermal radiation that human eyes are completely blind to. It looks beyond the visible surface of things, peering directly into the molecular signatures of the cosmos. When a molecule absorbs light, it vibrates. Different chemical structures vibrate at very specific, unique frequencies, absorbing distinct slivers of the light spectrum and leaving behind dark gaps in the data. By analyzing these gaps, a process known as spectroscopy, scientists can read the chemical makeup of a world hundreds of millions of miles away with devastating precision. They can tell you exactly what atoms are bound together, how heavy they are, and how they are behaving under extreme pressure. When Webb's instruments locked onto Europa, researchers were searching for the faint, expected signatures of a slow, predictable ocean world. They were looking for the standard trace amounts of carbon dioxide and salts that would confirm our theories of gradual subterranean geology. They expected the ice to be a mostly pure, frozen barrier, with only minor impurities leaking through over eons. They wanted a quiet, bubbling vent at the bottom of a dark sea, safely contained and scientifically mundane. What the infrared data returned was not a confirmation. It was an anomaly so aggressive that it broke the baseline of our physical models. The spectral lines did not align with a passive, dormant ocean. Webb detected a massive, deeply concentrated deposit of carbon dioxide mapped directly onto a specific region known as Terra Regio. This is an area of highly disrupted, chaotic terrain, a scarred wasteland where the ice shell has been recently shattered, inverted, and refrozen in jagged, terrifying formations. The carbon wasn't brought there by meteorites. The specific isotopic ratios of this carbon, the exact physical weight and atomic structure of the molecules, scream of an origin deep within the subterranean ocean, violently pushed to the surface on a geological timescale that is far too fast for our equations to handle. This is not a slow leak through a microscopic fissure. This is an eruption. The sheer volume and purity of heavy carbon present on the surface cannot be explained by passive diffusion or the slow melting of ice. It requires a thermodynamic engine operating at a scale and intensity that we previously deemed impossible for a moon of this size. The chemistry is wrong. The energy output is entirely wrong. Our mathematical models for the thermal capacity of Europa's core are actively failing to account for the heat required to drive this level of rapid chemical synthesis and vertical transport through 10 miles of solid ice. We have spent decades assuming that if a subsurface ocean existed, it would be a cold, stagnant abyss, slowly churning minerals in a state of near equilibrium. We assumed it was safe, predictable, and mostly dead. But the near-infrared telemetry proves that the abyss is not stagnant. It is hyperactive. The molecular complexity detected violently etched into the ice suggests a level of oceanic toxicity, a chaotic mixing of organic compounds and raw thermal energy that behaves less like a gentle hydrothermal vent and more like a planetary-scale chemical reactor operating completely out of control. The terrifying truth is that we have entirely misunderstood the fundamental nature of the dark. We believed that an absence of sunlight meant an absence of complexity, an absence of the aggressive, chaotic driving forces that spark violent chemical reactions. We assumed that the deep ocean of Europa was a quiet, frozen sanctuary. Instead, the mathematics of the light spectrum have handed us a physical certainty that something beneath that ice is generating an environment so extreme, so chemically hostile, and so energetic that it defies the very definition of a stable geologic body. The equations governing thermodynamics are breaking down before our eyes, leaving us staring at a world that is practically screaming its alien nature into the void. And as the researchers at the Space Telescope Science Institute run the numbers again and again, trying to find an error in the calibration, they are forced to confront a reality where the immense pressures beneath the ice are forging compounds that simply have no business existing in a dead ocean. To grasp the terrifying architecture of the anomaly the James Webb Space Telescope has uncovered, we must first abandon our human perception of scale and time. When we look at the raw data flowing from the near-infrared spectrograph, an instrument heavily shielded and suspended 1 million miles from our planet, we are not looking at a photograph. We are reading the autopsy report of a living, violently active geologic engine. The telescope does not see the universe as a canvas of visual colors. It reads it as a grid of thermal emission, a massive barcode of atomic signatures vibrating in the cold. Imagine driving down an abandoned, ruined highway in the dead of night. The fog so thick and suffocating, it swallows the hood of your car. Your eyes are completely useless in this environment. But if you were equipped with a military-grade thermal sensor, the headlights of an oncoming vehicle in the fog wouldn't just be blurred halos of light. They would be highly distinct signatures of heat, revealing the exact mechanical friction, the cylinder count, and the exhaust temperature of the engine approaching you in the dark. This is exactly how James Webb observes the cosmos. It cuts through the visual noise, pierces the absolute dark of the outer solar system, and reads the raw, vibrating energy of molecules sitting on the surface of a frozen world. When the operators at the Space Telescope Science Institute trained this sensor on a specific coordinate of Europa known as Terra Regio, they expected a quiet reading. Terra Regio is a region of what astrophysicists call chaos terrain. It is an area of the moon's surface that looks as though a planetary-scale hammer smashed the ice crust into fragments, leaving massive, jagged, inverted icebergs frozen in a vast, shattered wasteland. The expected telemetry from this fractured wasteland should have been the flat, lifeless thermal signature of ancient water ice slowly sublimating into the vacuum. Instead, the telemetry returned a screaming anomaly. The infrared barcode was entirely dominated by the heavy, unmistakable frequency of concentrated carbon dioxide. To truly understand why this specific chemical signature induces a profound sense of dread in planetary scientists, you must understand the hostile environment in which Europa exists. The space surrounding Jupiter is not merely empty vacuum, it is a lethal, invisible meat grinder. Jupiter possesses a magnetic field so gargantuan and incredibly powerful that it acts as a monstrous particle accelerator. It traps charged particles from the solar wind and catches the volcanic exhaust constantly spewing from its neighboring moon, Io. This mechanism creates a localized radiation belt so intense that if a human were to stand on the surface of Europa in a standard spacesuit, the invisible heavy radiation would tear through their cellular structure and deliver a biologically lethal dose in less than 10 minutes. The surface of Europa is not a museum. It is a killing floor, constantly bombarded, stripped, and chemically altered by this relentless high-energy stream of charged particles. The mathematics governing this radiation bombardment are absolute and unforgiving. Any complex molecule resting on the surface of Europa is subjected to a terrifying rapid rate of decay. The molecular bonds that hold carbon and oxygen together are forcibly ripped apart by the incoming radiation. Carbon dioxide, when exposed nakedly to this environment, simply cannot survive. It is broken down, scattered, and entirely erased from the surface on a cosmic timescale that is barely the blink of an eye. If a comet impact delivered a payload of carbon dioxide to Europa 1 billion years ago, or even 1 million years ago, the radiation would have scoured it out of existence eons before humanity learned to look at the stars. Therefore, the sheer density and purity of the carbon dioxide that Webb detected in the fractured ice of Terra Regio presents an inescapable, terrifying physical reality. The timeline strictly forbids an ancient origin. The only mathematically viable explanation is that the carbon dioxide is fresh. It is new. It is being actively, aggressively replenished right now. Something massive is manufacturing heavy carbon deep within the pitch-black abyss of the subterranean ocean, and a violent geological mechanism is actively pushing it upward through miles of crushing ice, bleeding it out onto the irradiated surface faster than Jupiter can destroy it. Let us descend into that abyss, because the scale of the environment we are dealing with defies human comprehension and terrestrial analogies. When we speak of oceans, our minds naturally default to the Pacific or the Atlantic. The deepest point on our entire planet, the Mariana Trench, plunges a mere 7 miles down into the crust. At that depth, the pressure is roughly 1,000 times greater than at sea level. It is a crushing weight sufficient to compress the hull of a military submarine until it crumples like a tin can. But the Mariana Trench is barely a shallow puddle compared to the architecture of Europa. Beneath the 10 to 15 miles of solid frozen rock ice that makes up the Moon's heavily scarred crust, the hidden ocean of Europa plunges downward into the absolute dark for an estimated 60 to 100 miles. The sheer volume of liquid water locked beneath the ice is staggering, representing an aquatic mass that holds more than twice the water found in all of Earth's oceans combined. But it is the mathematics of the pressure within this abyss that truly breaks the mind. As you descend through this lightless void, the weight of the water above you does not simply add up. It compounds exponentially. We are not talking about simple arithmetic addition. We are talking about a suffocating, ruthless multiplication of force. Deep within the European Ocean, near the rocky seafloor, the pressure reaches a critical threshold where the fundamental behavior of water begins to warp and fail. The molecules are squeezed together with such unnatural ferocity that the liquid teeters on the edge of crystallizing into exotic, high-density forms of ice. Not from cold, but from sheer crushing mechanical force pushing the atoms into a corner. Yet we know the abyss remains liquid. We know this not as a speculative theory, but as a measured physical fact, proven by an elegant and chilling observation made by the Galileo spacecraft in the late 1990s. As Galileo flew through the Jovian system, its magnetometer, a highly sensitive instrument designed to read the invisible sweeping lines of magnetic force, detected a massive anomaly. Jupiter's gargantuan magnetic field sweeps over its moons like an invisible, relentless tsunami. If Europa were entirely solid ice and rock down to its core, this magnetic wave would pass right through it without interacting, leaving no trace. But that is not what the telemetry recorded. The data showed that as Jupiter's magnetic field swept over Europa, it induced a massive, secondary opposing magnetic field that emanated from within the Moon itself. This operates on the exact same principle of physics that drives the massive spinning gears of an industrial electric motor or the heavy transformers in a global city grid. When a moving magnetic field sweeps across a highly conductive material, it generates a massive electrical current within that material, which in turn generates its own opposing magnetic field. The physics are non-negotiable. The only way Europa could possibly produce this specific, planetary-scale magnetic signature is if a global, incredibly conductive layer exists trapped beneath the ice. In the freezing vacuum of the outer solar system, there is only one viable candidate for a liquid conductor of that immense magnitude, a colossal ocean saturated with heavy, dissolved salts. So, we have a scientifically verified, violently pressurized, pitch-black, hypersaline ocean, 100 miles deep, permanently locked beneath an armored shell of moving ice. But a dark ocean alone does not explain the violent upwelling of carbon dioxide. For that, we must look to the very bottom, to the lightless seafloor. On Earth, the bottom of the ocean is the quiet end of the line. Dust settles, and things remain buried. But on Europa, the ocean floor is an active, roaring battlefield, because Europa is caught in the brutal, unending gravitational tug-of-war between Jupiter's immense mass and the gravity of the other large moons. The solid, rocky core of the Moon is subjected to immense tidal heating. Imagine taking a solid block of thick metal and relentlessly mechanically bending it back and forth. The friction within the microscopic molecular structure will rapidly generate immense heat. This exact process is happening to Europa on a planetary scale. The deep rocky mantle beneath the European Ocean is constantly grinding, fracturing and melting under the sheer gravitational stress of its orbit. The mathematics governing the heat transfer from this violently active grinding core into the freezing ocean above dictate a terrifying mechanical scenario. The amount of thermal energy required to simply sustain a liquid ocean of this incredible volume against the freezing void of deep space is astronomical. But the amount of thermal energy required to not only sustain the liquid state, but to actively drive heavy carbon molecules up from the rocky seafloor, push them through 100 miles of crushing heavy water, and force them violently through microscopic fissures in a 10-mile thick ice shell, requires a thermal engine that operates with monstrous, terrifying power. This upward transport process is not a gentle bubbling. The thermodynamic equations imply the existence of colossal deep-sea hydrothermal vent systems, spewing superheated water raw chemical building blocks and highly toxic minerals into the dark ocean at temperatures that would instantly flash-boil human flesh. The carbon detected by James Webb in the shattered ice of Terra Regio is the exhaust of this unseen engine. It is the raw material of complex chemistry being forged in an environment of total darkness and unimaginable crushing pressure, ripped from the seafloor and hurled toward the surface by sheer thermal violence. Consider the agonizing physical journey of those carbon molecules. They are violently synthesized in the crushing, boiling dark of a deep-sea vent. They are then caught in massive, sluggish, terrifying convection currents of hypersaline water, rising relentlessly through miles of absolute blackness. It is an upward journey that might take centuries. They eventually reach the underside of the massive ice shell, where the freezing temperatures of space wage a constant, grinding war against the upward push of the internal heat. The monumental pressure forces the carbon-rich water into microscopic, shifting cracks in the ice. It slowly freezes, melts, and grinds its way upward as the massive tectonic plates of the moon shift, groan, and shatter under Jupiter's relentless gravity. Finally, the carbon erupts onto the surface of Terra Regio, exposed instantly to the lethal, invisible radiation of the cosmos, screaming its chemical signature into the void just in time for a telescope 1,000,000 miles from Earth to catch the fading echo of its existence. The sheer, monumental scale of this mechanism is overwhelming. We are looking at a planetary-scale circulatory system, driven not by a heart, but by gravity, impossible pressure, and the decay of heavy elements. The carbon dioxide scattered across Terra Regio is not merely an anomaly of the ice. It is a direct message from the deep abyss. It is physical proof that the hidden ocean of Europa is not a stagnant, sterile, quiet tank of water waiting passively to be explored. It is a hyperactive, violently energetic chemical reactor operating entirely in the dark. And the confirmed presence of carbon, the fundamental architectural building block of all known biology, sitting raw and exposed on the surface of a fractured ice world, forces us to confront a deeply unsettling realization about the nature of complexity in the universe. We are incredibly biased by our own fragile terrestrial existence. We instinctively look for systems that behave like ours, systems that require the gentle, nurturing warmth of a star and the calm stability of a shallow sea. But the universe is not bound by our preferences, nor does it care about our definitions of safety. The violent, churning thermodynamic engine operating relentlessly beneath the ice of Europa proves that complex chemistry does not require a sunlit garden. It can be forcefully forged in a crushing, lightless hell. The infrared data from the James Webb telescope aggressively strips away the final layers of our terrestrial comfort. We are staring directly at a planetary mechanism that possesses the raw, heavy materials, the immense thermal energy, and the powerful liquid solvent necessary to assemble incredibly complex structures in the absolute dark. The mathematics of probability, when applied to a violent chemical system of this immense scale and duration, suggest that the reactions occurring down there are not merely chaotic and random. They are relentless. They are forcefully exploring every possible combination of elements permitted by the ruthless laws of physics, operating continuously in a deep-sea laboratory the size of a planet. The staggering concentration of carbon detected is just the faint surface expression of a much larger, darker truth hidden below, pointing toward an abyss that refuses to remain silent. When the raw telemetry from the James Webb Space Telescope finally forced us to accept the existence of a violent planetary-scale chemical reactor, operating in the pitch black of Europa's subsurface ocean, a profound silence fell over the astrophysics community. It was not the silence of awe. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a paradigm collapsing under its own weight. To the general public, the discovery of complex, heavy carbon compounds violently pushed to the surface of an alien moon sounds like a triumph, a stepping stone toward finding life in the void. But to the physicists and thermodynamicists tasked with actually balancing the equations of reality, this discovery was a nightmare. It was a localized, catastrophic failure of the standard model of planetary mechanics. We are standing at the edge of a theoretical abyss. The physics we brought with us from Earth, The fundamental rules we drafted under the warm, comforting light of our local star are actively breaking down in the crushing, freezing darkness of the Jovian system. To understand the sheer terror of this scientific impasse, you have to look intimately at the unforgiving laws of thermodynamics. Since the late 19th century, our entire comprehension of the universe has been anchored by the concept of entropy. It is the ultimate, inescapable tax levied by reality. The mathematics of entropy dictate a merciless truth. The universe aggressively hates order. It despises concentration. If you have a concentrated source of heat, energy, or chemical complexity, the universe will relentlessly tear it apart, bleeding it out into the surrounding void until everything is a flat, dead, silent equilibrium. Heat must dissipate. Mountains must erode. Complex molecules must break down. This is not a suggestion. It is the absolute, foundational law governing the flow of time and energy from the Big Bang to the eventual heat death of the cosmos. Under these rules, Europa is an impossibility. It is a paradox that is actively mocking our supercomputers. The problem lies in the lethal mathematics of heat transfer and physical containment. We have established that the immense gravitational friction from Jupiter is pulverizing Europa's rocky core, generating the gargantuan thermal energy required to sustain a subterranean ocean. But heat is not static. It is desperate to escape. In our current models, this heat should radiate upward from the seafloor, pass through the ocean and violently attack the underside of the 10-mile-thick ice shell. Here is where the math shatters. If the thermal engine at the core is truly powerful enough to forge the heavy, complex carbon chains detected by Webb, and powerful enough to drive massive, roaring convection currents that hurl these molecules through 100 miles of crushing water pressure, then the energy output is staggering. It is an internal fire of unimaginable ferocity. According to every thermodynamic calculation ever written, an engine running that hot, locked inside a planetary body of that exact mass, should have entirely melted the ice shell billions of years ago. The heat should have overwhelmed the freezing vacuum of space, turning Europa into an exposed, boiling water world, slowly bleeding its atmosphere into the radiation belts of Jupiter until there was nothing left but a dry, dead rock. Yet the ice remains, 10 miles of solid frozen armor. Conversely, if the ice is thick enough and cold enough to maintain its structural integrity against the vacuum of space, it implies that the internal heat of the ocean is heavily suppressed. It means the energy dissipating from the core is weak, barely enough to keep the water from freezing solid all the way to the bedrock. If the engine is that weak, it completely lacks the violent, roaring power necessary to force heavy elements upward through the crushing abyss and shatter the ice at Terra Regio. Our equations demand a choice. You can either have a boiling, exposed ocean or a frozen, dead tomb. The mathematics do not allow for both. They do not allow for a roaring, hyperactive chemical foundry perfectly contained within a fragile shell of ice. It is like finding a massive, roaring jet engine operating at full afterburner, perfectly sealed inside a thin glass box, and the glass refuses to shatter. The thermal equilibrium is balanced on a razor's edge that is mathematically illegal. This is the great paradox. The data is forcing us to confront a terrifying gap in our understanding of how matter and energy interact under extreme alien conditions. When the researchers fed the Webb spectral data into the massive hydrodynamic simulations at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the computers choked. The algorithms, built on decades of verified terrestrial physics, began spitting out impossibilities. The simulations predicted violent thermal runaways, ocean boiling events, or immediate planetary freezing. They could not produce the Europa we are looking at. The physicists were forced to manually halt the simulations, sitting in the cold glow of their monitors, realizing that their foundational understanding of planetary heat transfer was missing a massive, invisible variable. Something in that dark ocean is regulating the heat. Something is acting as a colossal, planetary-scale dampener, capturing the violent kinetic energy of the core, utilizing it to forge complex chemistry, and then perfectly dissipating the exhaust so it does not melt the sky. We have no mathematical vocabulary for a system like this. It is a level of thermodynamic efficiency that borders on the engineered. But the thermodynamic paradox is only the first wall we hit. The second barrier is far more sinister, and it deals with the fragile physical architecture of complexity itself. Even if we assume the thermodynamic models are fundamentally broken, and we accept the impossible engine operating in the dark, we are forced to confront the nightmare of the vertical journey. The heavy carbon compounds synthesized at the roaring seafloor must travel upward to reach the surface. This is not an empty elevator shaft. It is a 100-mile deep column of water under immense, crushing pressure. As these molecules are swept up in the violent convection currents, they enter a physical meat grinder. We instinctively think of water as a gentle solvent. But at the bottom of the Europan abyss, water is compressed so tightly by the crushing weight of the ocean above that its molecular behavior radically alters. It becomes a hostile, hyper-dense medium. When complex heavy carbon chains, the delicate, intricate scaffolding required for any biological process, are forced through this crushing environment, the physical pressure acts like a vice. The chemical bonds holding the molecules together are subjected to sheer mechanical stress. On Earth, complex chemistry is fragile. It requires stability. If you subject our most complex organic compounds to the extreme pressure and chaotic thermal mixing of the Europan deep, the bonds simply snap. The molecules are physically crushed back into raw, dead sludge. The physics of extreme pressure dictate an absolute ceiling on chemical complexity. It is a harsh, mathematical limit on how intricate a molecule can become before the sheer weight of its environment tears it apart. But the carbon signatures retrieved by the Webb telescope are heavy. They are intricate. They are surviving the crush. This presents an agonizing contradiction. The molecules are being forged in an environment of extreme violence, surviving a journey through a medium that should mathematically obliterate them, and finally forcing their way through microscopic, shifting fissures in 10 miles of grinding, groaning ice. Imagine threading a delicate silken thread through the roaring, grinding gears of a massive industrial machine without it snapping. It defies the statistical probability of survival. Astrophysicists and chemists are now staring at a terrifying prospect. The fundamental rules of chemical bonding, the way electrons share space and hold atoms together, might physically change when isolated in a high-pressure, hypersaline, heavily irradiated environment for billions of years. We are looking at the possibility of a shadow chemistry, a dark parallel architecture of molecular biology that operates on principles entirely alien to terrestrial science. The carbon on Europa's surface is not just a chemical footprint, it is an artifact of a physics we do not yet possess, and that is where the true, creeping dread of this discovery sets in. The paradox of Europa's thermodynamics and the survival of its complex chemistry point to a massive blind spot in human knowledge. We have spent the last century congratulating ourselves on mapping the quantum realm and charting the expansion of the cosmos. We believed we had the blueprints of reality firmly in hand. We assumed that the universe was uniform. We assumed that the gravity that pulls an apple to the ground and the heat that boils water in a kettle operate exactly the same way in the darkest, most isolated corners of the solar system. We are suddenly realizing that we are like children trying to understand the architecture of a global internet server farm by studying the mechanics of a single mechanical clock. The frustration within the scientific community is palpable. It is not spoken of in press conferences. It is hidden in the dry, highly technical language of published papers, buried under layers of academic caution. But read between the lines of the thermodynamic models being frantically revised. Look at the sheer volume of emergency grants being pushed through to study high-pressure, low-temperature carbon bonding. It is the frantic, quiet panic of a species realizing the dark is much deeper and much more complicated than the lights of our small world allowed us to see. If our physics is incomplete here, in our own backyard, orbiting the planet next door, it begs a devastating question. What else are we completely wrong about? If a simple frozen moon can harbor an environment that violently breaks our understanding of energy conservation and chemical limits, what unseen mechanisms are grinding away in the truly deep, empty spaces between the stars? The barrier is no longer just the physical ice of Europa. The barrier is the limit of human comprehension. We are standing before a locked door, and the James Webb Space Telescope has just slipped a piece of paper under the frame. So on that paper, is a set of chemical coordinates and thermal signatures that read like an impossible riddle. The math does not work. The physics are broken. The engine running in the dark is pulling thermal energy out of nothing, forging complexity out of chaos, and defying the fundamental law of entropy with a cold mechanical ruthlessness. And the hardest, most terrifying pill to swallow is that this impossible machine has been running in total, silent darkness for 4 billion years, entirely indifferent to whether we understand it or not. The telemetry continues to pour in. The deep infrared sensors keep reading the scarred ice, and the data paints a picture of an anomaly that refuses to resolve into a neat terrestrial explanation. We are left staring at the raw numbers, watching our physics fracture piece by piece, realizing that whatever is buried beneath that ice is protected by a set of rules we are only just beginning to realize we do not know. The collapse of our physical models on the icy surface of Europa forces us to step back and look at the cosmos through a terrifyingly different lens. For the entirety of human history, we have suffered from a severe case of planetary narcissism. We looked at our blue oceans, our breathable atmosphere, and the warm, steady light of our yellow sun, and we arrogantly declared this to be the gold standard of reality. We assumed that if the universe wanted to build complexity, if it wanted to forge the heavy molecules of life, it required our specific blueprint, a sunlit rock in a quiet orbit. But the violent, roaring chemical engine locked beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon violently dismantles that assumption. It presents a hidden consequence that alters the very mathematical probability of our existence, and it paints a picture of a universe that is profoundly hostile to the fragile, surface-dwelling reality we call home. To understand the sheer existential dread of this paradigm shift, you must first look at the cold, hard statistics of the galaxy. When astrophysicists scan the Milky Way, they're not finding an abundance of Earth-like worlds basking in the gentle glow of stable stars. The mathematics of stellar formation dictate a much darker, colder reality. The overwhelming majority of stars in our galaxy are red dwarfs, dim, violent, ancient stars that emit weak light and constantly strip their inner planets bare with massive waves of localized radiation. Furthermore, the sheer mechanics of planetary formation frequently violently eject young planets from their solar systems entirely, sending them out into the lightless void as rogue planets, drifting eternally through the freezing dark between the stars. If you were to take a random sample of all the water in the universe, almost none of it is resting gently on a sunlit surface. The absolute overwhelming majority of liquid water in the cosmos is trapped beneath heavy layers of rock and ice, crushed by gravity, and heated entirely by the internal mechanical friction of planetary cores. Europa is not an anomaly. Earth is the anomaly. We are the statistical freak. We are the exposed, fragile aberration clinging to the outer skin of a rock, completely reliant on the temporary, burning nuclear furnace of a star. The infrared data pouring in from the James Webb telescope is forcing us to realize that the true dominant habitat of the universe is not the sunlit surface. It is the high-pressure, hypersaline, pitch-black, abyssal ocean. If the heavy carbon structures we are detecting can be relentlessly forged in the crushing dark of Europa, then they are being forged in billions of identical dark oceans across the galaxy. The universe is not a dead, empty desert punctuated by rare oases of light. It is heavily populated by planetary-scale chemical reactors locked away in vaults of ice, operating completely independently of the stars above them. This realization requires a horrifying reassessment of what time means on a cosmic scale. On Earth, we view time as a sequence of visible events driven by the sky. Our days are marked by rotation, our seasons by orbit, our entire evolutionary history shaped by catastrophic external interruptions. Asteroids slam into our surface and wipe out the dinosaurs. Solar flares violently disrupt our atmosphere. Ice ages advance and retreat based on minor wobbles in our planetary tilt. Biology on the surface of a planet is a frantic, desperate scramble to adapt to a violently shifting environment. We are the product of instability. We evolved intelligence because our environment constantly threatened to erase us. But time operates on a profoundly different, terrifyingly slow mechanism beneath 100 miles of ice. Down there in the dark, the sky never changes because there is no sky. There are no seasons. There is no day or night. There are no asteroid impacts to reset the biological clock. There is only the crushing absolute black, the immense pressure of the water column, and the slow, grinding mechanical rhythm of the rocky seafloor tearing itself apart under Jupiter's gravity. Time is measured in the million-year shifts of tectonic plates and the agonizingly slow convection currents of hypersaline water. If the complex chemistry forged at the bottom of the European abyss crosses the threshold into self-replicating biology, it enters a timeline of unbroken, terrifying stability. An ecosystem born in that crushing dark does not face the cosmic shooting gallery of the surface. It is perfectly insulated. It has hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of years of uninterrupted quiet time to relentlessly experiment with the limits of physical reality. Try to imagine the architecture of a biology engineered for that environment. It would share absolutely nothing with the delicate light-dependent structures of Earth. It would have no eyes, for there is not a single photon of light to capture. It would have no concept of up or down, only the gradient of pressure and the localized thermal hotspots of the boiling seafloor vents. To survive the mechanical crush of the deep water, its cellular structure would need to be phenomenally dense, perhaps utilizing heavy metals and exotic carbon bonds that would shatter under the weak atmospheric pressure of our world. It would be a slow, heavy, armored expression of life, feeding directly on the raw, toxic thermal energy bleeding out of the planet's core. To such an entity, the universe is incredibly small and incredibly heavy. The entire cosmos consists of the boiling rock below and the impenetrable ceiling of frozen ice above. They would have no knowledge of Jupiter. They would have no concept of stars, of galaxies, or of the infinite expanding vacuum of space. Their reality is a closed, pressurized, lightless sphere. And this brings us to the most unsettling consequence of all. It is a solution to a mathematical paradox that has haunted astrophysicists for decades: the deafening silence of the night sky. We look out at a universe containing trillions of stars, mathematically bursting with the chemical ingredients for complexity, and we hear absolutely nothing. No radio signals, no massive megastructures blocking the light of distant suns, no signs of an expanding interstellar empire. We have pointed our most sensitive instruments at the void, listening for the faint chatter of a civilization that mirrors our own, and the universe has responded with a terrifying, absolute silence. We assumed this silence meant we were alone. We assumed that the leap from raw chemistry to complex intelligence is so impossibly rare that it almost never happens, and that humanity is a lonely spark in a dead void. The anomaly on Europa suggests a far more disturbing reality. The universe might be violently, aggressively teeming with complex chemistry and biological mechanics. It might be overflowing with life, but that life is entirely trapped. If the mathematical default for complex chemistry is the high-pressure subterranean ocean, then the overwhelming majority of biology in the cosmos is permanently locked in the dark. You do not build a radio telescope under 100 miles of crushing water. You do not discover the laws of orbital mechanics when your entire universe is sealed by a roof of ice 10 miles thick. You do not look up and dream of conquering the stars because the stars do not exist in your reality. The universe is completely silent to us not because it is empty, but because its inhabitants are buried alive. They are trapped in an evolutionary dead end dictated by thermodynamics. The immense gravity and pressure required to shield them from the hostile radiation of space also acts as an inescapable prison. Any intelligence that might slowly, methodically evolve in that dark abyss would be forever confined to its planetary tomb. To attempt to break through the ice would mean exposing themselves to the freezing vacuum and lethal radiation of the surface, an environment for which their heavy, pressurized biology is entirely incompatible. They are born in the dark. They will evolve in the dark. And when their planet's internal friction finally grinds to a halt billions of years from now, they will quietly freeze in the dark, never knowing that the rest of the universe existed. This forces us to look in the mirror and confront our own fragile, terrifying trajectory. We are the anomaly that slipped through the cracks. We evolved on the thin, exposed skin of a rock, relying on a delicate temporary balance of atmospheric gases and the perfect fragile distance from a burning star. Because we are exposed to the sky, we saw the stars. Because we saw the stars, we developed mathematics to measure them. Because we are light and uncrushed by pressure, we could build rockets to reach them. We are the exceedingly rare byproduct of a chaotic, dangerous surface environment. But that exposure comes with an inescapable, fatal cost. Our environment is not permanent. Our sun is actively consuming its nuclear fuel. The delicate thermodynamic balance that keeps our oceans liquid and our atmosphere breathable is mathematically guaranteed to fail. To survive our own future, we must leave this rock. We must expand into the cosmos. Yet, as we look outward, mapping the planets and moons of our galaxy, we are realizing that the universe is not offering us sanctuary. The real estate of the cosmos is entirely hostile to our fragile, surface-adapted biology. The universe is dominated by freezing vacuum, lethal radiation belts, and crushing dark oceans. The environments where chemistry naturally thrives are the exact environments that would instantly pulverize a human body. The heavy carbon molecules violently staining the scarred ice of Terra Regio are a physical warning. They are a monument to the true nature of the cosmos. The universe is an indifferent mechanical engine that favors the heavy, the dark, and the crushed. We are an arrogant, fragile species made of light elements and water, screaming our radio signals into a void that is heavily populated by silent, subterranean monstrosities. We are navigating a cosmic architecture that was never designed for us to survive, staring at the telemetry of a dead moon, slowly realizing the sheer, impossible magnitude of the physical barriers standing between us and tomorrow. When we finally process the telemetry from Europa, we are forced into a deeply uncomfortable reckoning with our own place in the architecture of reality. For millennia, human beings have stood on the shores of our quiet, sunlit oceans and looked up at the night sky, believing that the vastness of space was an empty stage waiting for our arrival. We convinced ourselves that our intelligence, our biology, and our evolution under an open sky were the inevitable pinnacle of cosmic design. We assumed that the absolute silence of the universe was simply a void waiting to be filled by human voices, a quiet theater patiently waiting for the main act. But the scarred, heavily irradiated ice of Terra Regio aggressively shatters that comforting illusion. The violent chemical engine churning beneath that frozen shell does not represent a welcoming cosmos, nor does it offer a secondary home for our fragile species. It represents a universe that operates with a cold, mechanical indifference to our existence. It dictates that the standard model for complex chemistry is not the gentle warmth of a rocky surface bathed in starlight, but the crushing, lightless abyss of a subterranean ocean. If the universe is indeed teeming with biology, the terrifying mathematical probability is that almost all of it is permanently trapped in the dark. Imagine the sheer, incomprehensible scale of this invisible reality. Billions of planetary reactors across the Milky Way, grinding away in total isolation, permanently locked beneath impenetrable vaults of ice and rock. Entire evolutionary lineages, vast and heavily armored, that will never perceive a single photon of sunlight, never conceptualize the infinite void above them, and never broadcast a single radio wave to signal their existence. The deafening silence we hear when we point our instruments at the stars is not the sound of an empty galaxy. It is the muffled silence of a cosmic graveyard filled with locked doors. It is the sound of life buried alive. We are the statistical aberration, an incredibly fragile temporary manifestation of biology that somehow emerged on the exposed, violently dangerous skin of a rocky planet. We are the absolute anomaly that managed to look up. But this cosmic privilege is a terrifying burden, because unlike the heavy, pressure-adapted biology that might be relentlessly churning at the bottom of the European abyss, perfectly insulated from the violent mechanics of the cosmos, we have absolutely nowhere to hide. We are completely exposed to the relentless astronomical forces that will inevitably exhaust our sun, strip away our delicate atmosphere, and return our temporary home to the freezing void. The James Webb Space Telescope continues its silent orbit 1 million miles away, its massive golden mirrors passively catching the ancient light of dead galaxies and the brutal thermal signatures of frozen moons. It does not judge the data, It does not offer comfort. It simply measures the absolute unvarnished reality of the dark. And as we process those cold numbers, translating the raw thermal energy of heavy carbon into a picture of a boiling, lightless ocean, we are left with a single, unshakable realization. The universe is not waiting for us. It was not designed for us. It is a vast, unending machine of crushing pressure, freezing vacuum and violent radiation, grinding away in the pitch black. And as we stand on our fragile, temporary world, looking out into the infinite ocean of the cosmos, we must finally accept that the dark is heavily populated, intensely active, and entirely indifferent to whether we survive the night.